Andrew Huberman recently released a podcast episode discussing ways to improve endurance. And while he usually does provide some great knowledge, there is a portion of this podcast that I did not agree with, talking about high intensity aerobic conditioning. The suggested training method seemed way too aggressive and not structured in a way that would provide any sort of sustainable long-term benefits. So let's listen to what he said.
I want to make sure I touch on the fourth protocol, which is high intensity aerobic conditioning. So HIIT has these two forms, anaerobic and aerobic. High intensity aerobic conditioning also involves about 3 to 12 sets. A 1-to-1 ratio is powerful for building, on average, most of the energy systems involving, remember, we had these nerve, muscle, blood, heart, and lungs. A 1-to-1 ratio might be you run a mile, and however long that takes, you might run, first mile is, let's say, 7 minutes, then you rest for 7 minutes. Then you run a mile again, and it might take 8 minutes, and you rest for 8 minutes. And you continue that for a total of 4 miles of work, 4 miles of running work, I should say. You can build this up. So what would this look like, and when should you do this? Well, it's really a question for these workouts of asking how much work can one do in 8 to 12 minutes, right? And then rest and then repeat. How much work can you do for 8 to 12 minutes, then rest and then repeat? And how many times should you do this? Well, this is the sort of thing, it's pretty intense. And so you would probably only want to do this 2, maybe 3 times a week if you're not doing many other things.
My first thoughts when I heard the term high intensity aerobic conditioning, in my head, I was thinking like threshold type training, high-end aerobic work done for maybe 20 minutes at a time at the most, as a single run or broken up into intervals with a short rest. Higher intensity, but still aerobic, still something that can be done fairly consistently and sustainably. But the structure of the workouts that Huberman was talking about more closely resemble what I'd call VO2 max work. 3 to 12 sets, although the 12 sets I'd say is on the very high end, with 1-to-1 recovery, meaning equal time, not equal distance. So in the example that he gave, 4 by 1 mile with equal time recovery would be a difficult but not totally crazy VO2 max style workout, done around 3K to 5K pace, or the pace that someone would run in a race that lasts like 10 to 15 minutes. The problem comes from the assumption that these reps are going to be 7 or 8 minutes. There are runners whose VO2 max pace or 3K, 5K pace might be 7 to 8 minutes per mile. I'm not arguing with that part, but what I disagree with is the idea that in this kind of workout that the reps would last 7 to 8 minutes. In a standard VO2 max type workout, reps typically max out around 5 minutes. Anything longer than that is too intense. And if you're going that long, it's closer in intensity to just a straight up race than it is a workout. But Huberman here is suggesting 8 minutes minimum, maxing out at 12 at a pace that he calls pretty intense. And at that pretty intense pace, which in description sounds like a VO2 max workout, doing reps that are 8 to 12 minutes long is just insane, even with equal time recovery. Like I talked about earlier, if you were doing shorter recoveries at a slower pace close to anaerobic threshold, that workout would make sense. That's when 8 to 12 minute reps could be appropriate. That'd be a very solid threshold workout. But a VO2 max workout with 8 to 12 minute reps would just kill you. So theoretically, if we were going to take the parameters of 3 to 12 sets at 8 to 12 minutes a rep and just totally max it out and go 12 reps of 12 minutes, that is 144 minutes. With equal recovery, you're looking at a 5-hour workout. Like maybe even within his own advice, it's not supposed to be stretched that much, but like that is a workout that fits within the parameters that he gave. But let's go the complete opposite direction. Let's go to the bare minimum workout within these parameters, which is 3 times 8 minutes for a total of 24 minutes. And 24, 25 minutes is usually around the maximum time athletes will spend like under tension, like in reps during a VO2 max workout. So that 24-25 minute range, which is typically for runners is going to be the maximum, is what Huberman is suggesting as a minimum. And when he says these workouts aren't done very often, I'm thinking even at that low end, that 24-minute total, like maybe once or twice a month at most. But then he says 2 or 3 times per week, which is just crazy. Like even like a standard, like well-structured VO2 max workout, 3 to 5 minute reps totaling like 24-25 minutes total is typically maxed out at once per week. And a lot of coaches will actually have athletes go less than that. These kinds of workouts are tough. The combination of pace and speed and like the time your body spends under tension is very glycolytic. It creates a very acidic environment in your body. There's a lot of fatigue products that are built up. It breaks the body down more than any other type of training that you do, and can really only be done on a regular basis, even if that just means once a week for 6 to 10 weeks at a time before you end up plateauing and burning out. Like this is the peak type of training that like elite athletes will be using to like get into maximum shape for like the peak of a racing season. But this method that Huberman is talking about with longer reps supposedly comes from a study. The study wasn't linked in the podcast episode or in his show notes or anything, so I wasn't able to look at it. Showing that it was a protocol for improving endurance. And the reality is the study probably did show that. But the problem with a lot of these studies is the subjects are not always well trained and the time frame used is not long enough. Influencers in this kind of health and fitness space kind of love to talk about VO2 max and all these like special protocols and workouts that you can do like this one. A lot of times based off these kinds of studies saying that VO2 max workouts are the best way to improve endurance. But like I mentioned, if you take an athlete who is in decent shape but not very well trained and have them do this type of work for a 6-week study, like yeah, they're going to get better. And this work does get you better the quickest, but it's not sustainable. Those 6 to 10 weeks for someone who hasn't been doing this type of training yet, they will get better, but beyond that time frame, like if they were to keep doing this after the study ended week after week after week, after those 6 to 10 weeks, like what happens? Maybe there's not as many studies about it, but great coaches over the years have tried things out on their athletes or themselves just through trial and error, realizing that these types of workouts cannot be done like continuously or very often without increased risk of injury or burnout or general fatigue and stagnating results and performance. So you got to keep that in mind from anything you might hear in like the health and fitness space. Just because one study says something, it might not be the whole picture. It's just like a narrow look in this very specific window. There's no single best method to improve endurance or performance. There's no magic workout or protocol. All sorts of coaches over the years have found all sorts of different ways to make things work. There's no magic workout. Everybody's different, so you just have to find what works for you. But just be careful of these random protocols that you have on the internet.